Vulnerability assessment is a process that uses a special designed tool to scan for vulnerabilities. A vulnerability assessment is a systematic review of security weakness in an information system. It evaluates if the system is susceptible to any one vulnerabilities, assigns severity levels to those vulnerabilities, and recommends remediation of mitigation if and whenever needed. Four different types of vulnerability have been identified: human, social, physical, economic, and environmental, and their associated direct and indirect losses. The example of vulnerability scanning tools are: Necto is an open source vulnerability scanning software that focuses on web application security. NetSparker is another web application vulnerability tool with an automation feature available to find vulnerabilities. OpenBAS, W3AF, Arachne, Aconitex, Nmap, OpenSCAP. Mapping and discovery. To be able to scan for vulnerabilities, you need to know what devices you have in your environment. Typically, you conduct scans against group or ranges of hosts, which change over time. If you don't have some method of keeping your list of hosts up to date, you'll get incomplete scans result, or you may scan the wrong host entirely. Mapping environments starts vulnerability scanning effort by creating a map of environment that shows you what devices are present on your network. Environment mapping is a scheme that improves on the mapping techniques of chrome and refraction mapping. In environment mapping, the object is surrounded by a closed three-dimensional surface onto which the environment is projected. Discovering new hosts. In addition to mapping to figure out what's there in the first place, you also bid to keep your list of hosts up to date. Launch a host discovery scan to see what hosts are on your network and associated information such as IP address, FQDN, operating system, and open ports available. After you have a list of hosts, you can choose what host you want to target in a specific vulnerability scan. You can actively or passively discover new hosts. Active discovery involves a process similar to one used map the network in the first place. You go IP by IP and interrogate each to see whether anything responds. This has many of the same limitation mapping does. But you could restrict these updates to portions of the network you know to contain devices. In the interest of being able to get through a network range more quickly and at shorter intervals, you can also use passive scanning techniques to discover devices on the network. This often involves placing a device at network choke points, such as router or switches, to save drop on the traffic floating through your infrastructure. In this way, you'll automatically discover devices as they talk on the network and can automatically add them on your list of hosts to scan.
Physical penetration testing. It is a direct physical measure. Some examples are lock picking and bypassing alarm system. Lock picking is the practice of unlocking a lock by manipulating the components of the lock device without the original key. Social engineering testing. Social engineering penetration testing is the practice of attempting typical social engineering scams on a company's employees to ascertain the organization's level of vulnerability to the type of exploit. Social engineering penetration testing are so effective that the tester almost always succeed and so many organizations refuse to allow them. This one takes place in some conjunction tests where it involves also the phishing attacks. Hardware testing. This one is an unusual penetration test. It occurs typically in some hardware devices like gears, TV, and etc. In addition of testing device, penetration testers often test the firmware on the device, such as mobile application, the devices used to communicate with their associated servers. Bug bounty programs. Bug bounty program is an organization offers reward to people who discover vulnerabilities in their resources. The cloud. One of the larger issues is that cloud providers generally don't like testers attacking their infrastructure at well. Cloud providers run a tight ship from a resource perspective and don't tend to like surprise activities that use large amount of their resources. A cloud which is considered as one of the hardest issue. Cloud providers doesn't want to attack their cloud infrastructure wall. Realistic testing. To get accurate results about your security, you need to perform realistic testing, which means in conducting the assessments and also known as a taller order than it sounds like. Roles of engagement. This engagement may need to closely adhere such conditions which an outside attack would exist. Scope. This may help to protect production assets. Finding skilled tester, which able to divide the two between highly skilled testers and experienced testers. The blue team and the purple team. The blue team should participate in the other side of the penetration test just as much as the red team is attacking, while you may not want to actively block attacks coming from the red team. You should definitely record and document the evidence of their activities. You should have evidence of every attack the red team gets through, or at least understand how it avoided your attention so you can fix your security. Instrumentation. To catch penetration tester in the act, you must have appropriate instrumentation in place. If you don't have intrusion detection system and firewalls, you can use to watch for unusual traffic, anti-malware, and file integrity monitoring tools on systems, and so on. You'll have no source of data to watch for these kinds of attacks. FIM tools are used to monitor the integrity of the application and operating system files on a particular machine. Typically, you'd use FIMs to monitor only sensitive files such as those that define configuration for the operating system or application or hold particularly sensitive data. FIM tools need to be carefully tuned. as they can produce a great deal of alerting noise if properly figured. Alerting. Proper alerting is important. You need to have good alerting so that you know when you quote the testers. You don't want your tools muttering to themselves in the corner, completely ignored by the blue team. You also need to be careful about the alerts you send. If you send too many alerts, particularly if they're false alarms, your blue team will start to ignore the alerts entirely. The common phrase for this, borrowed from the healthcare industry, is alert figure. You're changing attack surface. An attack surface is the sum of all the points that an attacker can use to interact with your environment. It is your web servers, mail servers, hosted cloud system, salespeople with laptops in the hotel rooms, internal source, and posted to public. Attacker change too. Attackers are constantly evolving their attacks and tools. Also, there are far more attackers than there are defenders, and many of the attackers have a direct monetary incentive to update their tools and techniques. To cope with attackers, the security industry for years and will continue to do so. Fixing security holes is expensive. Fixing holes in your security is expensive. It's ex- it's expensive in terms of resources, the cost of purchasing and updating your security controls, and the development efforts needed and to fix and secure code in your application and websites. More often than you'd like to think, an organization will fail to prioritize security over business priorities. This happens often in the security world, and you'll likely find a way to put another control in place or fill the gap with a security tool. Things won't always be perfect, but you must still do what you can make your organization secure.